Key, an old friend from Oklahoma, would come galloping out of the wings and across the stage astride a white pony. And in the twinkling of an eye, Will would rope Buck and the horse with both ropes at the same time. How about that? Well, he'd follow this exhibition with an amazing display of trick roping. One night, things weren't going too well, and Will suddenly found himself tangled in his lariats. Well, not knowing exactly what to do about it, he looked out at the audience rather sheepishly and he drawled,
"Swinging a rope is all right, I guess, as long as your neck ain't tangled in it."
Oh, well, the people roared and they forgot all about the tangled ropes. From then on, Will began to talk more and more to the audiences during his act. And sure enough, his friendly, easygoing humor caught on, and his new career as a homespun philosopher was on its way. In November of 1908, Will married Betty Blake of Rogers, Arkansas. Their marriage, a very happy one, produced 4 children. And on their 25th wedding anniversary, Will declared,
"The day I roped Betty, I did the star performance of my life."
Will joined the famous Ziegfeld Follies in 1915, and for many years remained one of the major attractions of those spectacular stage shows. Now, 1915 was also the year in which Will took his first airplane ride. It happened at Atlantic City in New Jersey, in what was called a flying boat, built by the famed aviation pioneer Glenn Curtiss. And Will, though nervous at first, enjoyed the flight, enjoyed it immensely, and from then on traveled by air every chance he had. Furthermore, he campaigned vigorously for a U.S. Air Force and was a friend and admirer of Charles Lindbergh, accompanying him on several flights. Will's favorite service organization was the Red Cross, and during World War I and over the years, in addition to his own generous contributions, continued through personal efforts to raise millions of dollars for it. Will made his first movie in 1918. It was a silent film called Laughing Bill Hyde. The picture was filmed at Fort Lee, New Jersey, and in it, Will played a hero. Sort of an easygoing tramp. After that, he moved his family to California, where he made more silent films. A very popular one was called The Roping Fool, a movie that showed him performing all of his rope routines in slow motion. Later, when sound was introduced, Will became one of the biggest stars of the talkies, and his movies became so successful with children that in many cities and towns, school was let out so the students could attend special Will Rogers matinee performances. How do you like that? Well, one of his big hits was a film called State Fair, in which a prize boar named Blue Boy played a pretty important part. On the last day of filming, the studio suggested he buy the boar for his family larder. Well, Will thought about it a moment, and then he replied,
"No, sir. I wouldn't feel right eating a fellow actor."
Will liked making motion pictures better than most of his other jobs, mainly because it gave him the chance to spend more time with his family in California. Oh, and they were a happy, close-knit group then. There was Will and his wife, Betty, Will Jr., Mary, and Jim. Another son, Freddie, died from diphtheria while still a toddler. Now, the family's favorite activity, practically a ritual, was horseback riding. And there was a fine stable of horses to choose from at the Rogers homestead in Santa Monica, California. Now, another pretty famous Oklahoman in those days was the one-eyed flyer Wiley Post, who in 1931 had piloted an airplane around the world for the very first time. Accompanied by a friend, he had made the epic flight in a period of 8 days and 15 hours. And he made the flight in a little red biplane called the Winnie Mae. Will and Wiley were good friends and decided to make a flying tour of Alaska together in late summer of 1935, during which time Will would bang out newspaper articles on his small portable typewriter about their adventures. It was during that tour that Will and his friend Wiley were killed when the Winnie Mae crashed near Point Barrow, Alaska on August 15th, 1935. At the time of his death, Will Rogers was the United States unofficial ambassador to the world, the nation's most widely read columnist, appearing daily in more than 500 newspapers that were read by some 40 million Americans, one of the two most popular movie stars in the U.S., a leading radio personality, author of several popular books, a welcome guest at the White House, and a much-cheered speaker at both Republican and Democratic conventions, where he was twice proposed as a Democratic presidential candidate. Speaking to the nation, President Roosevelt said, "The American nation, to whose heart he brought gladness, will hold him in everlasting remembrance." And little Shirley Temple, who was a big child star then, she said, "I loved him too." Will Rogers was at his best when things were happening in the world. His humor was wisdom with a smile. As skilled as he was with his lariats, his greatest lasso was laughter. And with it, he roped the funny, the sad, the happy, and the absurd events which influenced the first 35 years of the 20th century. His common sense was so uncommon that people figured it must be funny. Until they discovered how close to the truth it was.
I use only one set method in my little gags, and that is to try to keep to the truth.
Recently, I visited the Will Rogers Ranch in Santa Monica, California. And as I roamed around the place, I took some movies, which I'd like to share with you now. This is one of the famous statues of Will at the Will Rogers Memorial Building in Claremore. Now, if you were standing real close to it, I'll bet you could see the impish twinkle in Will's eyes. I'll bet you could almost hear him speaking. Well, I guess he is speaking in a way, because you see, carved at the base of the statue are some of the most memorable words he ever spoke. Warm, friendly words. Words that are the key to his way of life, to the kind of human being that was Will Rogers.
I never met a man I didn't like.
The preceding program was made possible by a grant from the Ohio Department of Education.
Funding for the American frontier is provided by the Independent Order of Foresters, the family fraternity, whose members enjoy a full fraternal social life, benefits, and security.
He was America's foremost journalist of the mid-1800s. He founded the New York Tribune, and he ran for the presidency against Ulysses S. Grant. But he is best remembered for the phrase, "Go west, young man, go west." And many a young man followed his advice. to the American frontier. Horace Greeley had been preaching the future of the frontier for at least a decade, before he ever came west. I'm Charlie Jones, and this is Merlin Olsen.
Ironically, Horace Greeley was not the originator of